My brothers and sisters in Christ, in today's first reading, we hear the interesting words from Gamaliel, one of the respected members of the Sanhedrin, who warns his fellow members before they take severe action against the apostles. While Gamaliel is not a Christian, he doesn't follow the way, yet he also recognizes the danger and the blind persecution of the apostles. For he recognizes that if one fights something that's of God, one finds themselves fighting God, fighting a very losing battle. And instead he tells them to be patient. If this Christian way is not of God, it will destroy itself. But if it is of God, then they don't want to be the ones standing in the way. And these words connect in a very beautiful way with today's feast day. It's been a long time with the season of Lent since we've had a true saint obligatory memorial on the calendar. But today the church celebrates the memorial of St. Catherine of Siena. Many times people promote this idea that the church treats women as second-class citizens or historically have put little value. And the first thing that always comes to mind when I hear this, aside from, of course, our great veneration of the Blessed Virgin Mary, is St. Catherine of Siena. And the reason I say this is St. Catherine was a 14th century saint, so right in the medieval time, which society was not an open time for promotion of women's causes. But St. Catherine was not a member of royalty. She wasn't even a consecrated religious. In fact, she was a very pious woman. She was a third order Dominican, but a lay woman that through her great mysticism and closeness to the Lord was inspired to do his work. And in fact, was one of the most powerful women in the history of the church. When you look at what she did, yes, she eventually founded a convent, but bigger than this, aside from her great works to the poor, those things that the gospel greatly commends, but this was the woman who had the clout to take on the Pope himself when the Pope was away in Avignon, who convinced him to come home to Rome where the Pope belonged. She was the one that even the Pope sent to mediate political disputes with different warring factions. And so this was a powerful woman. And we ask, well, what was so powerful about Catherine? It certainly wasn't a status she inherited. Well, simply put, it was her holiness. St. Catherine, through her mystical marriage to Christ, as she described it, had the power of Christ behind her. And so, much as Gamaliel warns against in the first reading, we definitely don't want to go into the headwind of God's will. We don't want to be fighting against God. But oh my, how powerful we are when we are cooperating with Christ. Invincible? No, at least not in a traditional sense. As followers of Christ, we are not assured protection from bodily harm or avoidance of suffering. These are things that go along with the Christian life. But we're promised that God ultimately holds us in the palm of his hand. And when we are following God's will, the power of God behind us, his grace as he goes before us as great champion, then mighty, mighty things are possible. Not the things that we will, but the things God wills. And so in Catherine, we can see an example of what is possible when we draw intimately close to the Lord and let nothing stand in the way of doing his will. And so, may we take inspiration from her on this saint day of St. Catherine during this Easter season, that in the joy of the resurrection, like we hear of the apostles in the first reading, that we may be joyfully willing to accept sufferings or punishment or ridicule for the name, but to go forth bravely, preaching the good news of the gospel, that nothing can stand between you and I or anyone and God who loves us. St. Catherine of Siena, pray for us.